My husband is a doctor. For years, he always looked after my health, always assuring me that everything was normal. Then one day, I passed out and was rushed to the hospital. The physician frowned when he saw the test results, uttering a single sentence that turned me cold. The X-ray was clipped up on the light box. A chilling bluish light illuminated the doctor's impassive face as he sat across from me. He wore thick-rimmed glasses, carefully observing what he called an anomalous finding. I couldn't handle any more professional, soothing words. My ears weren't ringing, and I wasn't dizzy. Everything just felt too sharp, too clear. "Mrs. Kemet," the doctor said, clearing his throat once as he searched for the softest words. "These are the results from the core needle biopsy we performed yesterday. The results indicate malignant cells. That means it's invasive ductal carcinoma, a malignancy, cancer." Those words should have shattered me, but they didn't. I just stayed seated. I sat in the worn leather chair of the small private office, feeling the cold air conditioning blast on the back of my neck. I'd already suspected it. My woman's intuition had told me that this lump lodged deep in my left breast wasn't some simple nodule or common fibrocystic change. The irony was thick. My husband, Langston, was a renowned oncologist in Atlanta, Georgia. He was the star department chair at the King Morehouse Medical Center, a man they called God's hands. Patients from all over the country flocked there, desperate for a single appointment. Yet with those same hands that had saved hundreds of lives, he had dismissed my concerns again and again. "You're too sensitive. I'm the expert." "Okay, it's nothing." The doctor facing me now, a complete stranger, was saying the very words my husband should have spoken. Fortunately, the timing of the discovery puts this at an intermediate stage, and there's no distant metastasis yet. We'll formulate a treatment plan immediately. You'll need surgery, chemotherapy, and possibly radiation therapy. I nodded, but my mind was already elsewhere. I remembered that night 3 weeks ago, the night our son Wami had a high fever. I remembered trying to call Langston, but his phone remained eerily silent. I remembered his look when he finally got home, rambling and offering flimsy excuses. Above all, I vividly recalled the moment his hand paused, just for an instant over my left breast. In that precise moment, I knew. He knew. "Mrs. Kemet, are you listening?" The doctor looked at me with concern. "Your husband, Dr. Langston Dubois, he's an oncologist, isn't he?" "Surely he also." "I understand, doctor," I interrupted. My voice was strangely calm. "Thank you. Could you give me a copy of my entire medical history? The original and the copies, please." I picked up my purse and walked out of the hospital. The afternoon sun in Atlanta was warm and biting. I didn't go home. I didn't call Langston. I went straight to a quiet spot, the Sweet Georgia Cafe, and ordered a glass of water. I sat there watching people pass by and started organizing everything in my mind with the speed of a machine. I pulled out my cell phone. I didn't have many contacts. Most were Wayne's teacher's numbers, the regular grocery store, and my husband's family. Without hesitation, I scrolled past the name, my love. I searched for another name, Khalil Bell, attorney. He was a young lawyer I had helped out when he was a fresh graduate in the legal department of my old firm. The phone rang 3 times before Khalil finally answered. "Talk to me. This is Khalil Bell." "Khalil, it's Zora, your former boss," I said. There was a brief pause before his voice brightened with familiar warmth. "Zora? Wow, how long has it been? How have you been? What do I owe the call?" His cheerfulness and easy enthusiasm were exactly as I remembered, unchanged by time. I took a deep breath, not to calm myself, but to prepare my question. "Khalil," I said, my voice firm, "I have to ask you something. By any chance, do you handle attempted murder cases?" There was a silence on the other end of the line, a heavy silence in which I could only hear Khalil's breathing. I knew this was just the beginning. People used to look at my marriage with envy, even jealousy, and I knew why. My husband was Dr. Langston Dubois. By his early 40s, he had become the youngest chief of service at one of the most prestigious university hospitals in Atlanta. He possessed the beauty of a mature, intellectual man. He spoke eloquently, acted like a gentleman, and was always the center of attention at every family gathering. Whenever we had a corporate dinner or visited the family's old neighborhood in South D, Langston was always the benchmark for others. "You are so lucky, Zora," a young colleague once said enviously. "Your husband isn't just competent, "He's gorgeous. He must treat you like a queen at home." Or the aunts would say, "Zora really hit the jackpot, finding a husband like Langston. He's good to his parents, adores his wife and son. It's hard to find a man like that nowadays." I only smiled bitterly at those comments. Luck? What luck was mine? I gained 33 pounds after giving birth to Wame. My stretch mark-covered stomach would never be the same. While Langston grew increasingly polished in his tailored suits, traveling to international conferences, and stepping further into success, I found myself wrapped in baggy house clothes, chosen only for comfort while nursing. Some days, when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the young woman who had once graduated with honors and dreamed boldly of her own career. I had agreed to take a step back. People called it sacrifice. I called it an unfair bargain. We were introduced by our families. I was 26, and he was 30. I was a simple employee in the accounting department, and he was a promising medical resident. Both families considered us the perfect couple. My parents were satisfied that he was educated and had a stable job. His parents, I believe, were satisfied that I was docile, well-mannered, came from a family of teachers, and most importantly, would take good care of the home. The wedding happened quickly. If there was love, it was a feeling cultivated within a preset framework. I thought marriage didn't necessarily require romance. Respect and responsibility were enough. Langston gave me that, at least for the first few years. He gave me his paycheck, remembered anniversaries, and called me honey in front of others. But that perfect facade was maintained at the cost of my own fading. As Langston's career flourished when he was appointed department chair, his busy days became more frequent, and family dinners grew rarer. "You have on-call duty again today?" I'd ask while preparing vegetables. "It's not just on-call duty. An emergency surgery came up, or I have a conference with the chief of service, or I need to meet specialists who are visiting from abroad." And I believed him. How could I not? He was a doctor, a noble profession that saved lives. How could I dare compare my job of changing diapers and preparing bottles with the lives he was saving? I promised myself I had to be a solid support on the home front. I had to let him concentrate on his work without worries. The trap of being well-mannered lay precisely there. Once you're compliant, people assume you always should be. Once Langston received an award at the hospital's anniversary ceremony, he walked onto the stage to accept a bouquet and a plaque. The stage lights illuminated him intensely. I was seated in the back row next to a nodding off-commie. The person next to me asked, "Which doctor are you related to?" I smiled and replied, "I'm Dr. Langston Dubois' wife." "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed. "You're Dr. Langston Dubois' wife. How wonderful. Do you also work in the health sector?" I shook my head. "No, I'm just a homemaker." Her gaze instantly changed, shifting from admiration to something I couldn't decipher. Perhaps pity, or maybe disdain. "Ah, I see." That night, Langston arrived home with a huge bouquet of flowers, tossed it onto the dining table, and loosened his tie. "I'm exhausted. Fix me some orange juice, please." I went to the kitchen. When I returned with the juice, he was dozing on the sofa with his phone screen still lit. There was a WhatsApp message on the display. "Honey, I've been waiting for you." I didn't ask who it was. I simply turned off his phone screen myself. I lied to myself, thinking it was just a patient or a colleague, because I was Zora, the polite wife of the perfect Dr. Langston Dubois. But now, sitting in the Sweet Georgia Cafe with an empty glass of water, I wondered if a perfect marriage leads a wife, upon discovering she has cancer, to call a lawyer to ask about an attempted murder case. Is it really a perfect marriage? Langston's busy schedule wasn't just due to conferences or unexpected surgeries. It was a constant state, an invisible wall he had built between himself and his family. Wame and I were the people standing outside that wall. My life was scheduled like a machine. Wake up at 5:30 a.m., prepare breakfast for the whole family. It was rare for Langston to eat at home, but I still had to prepare it. I have to leave early. There's a morning meeting at the hospital. He always said that. At 6:45, I would wake, bathe him, and feed him. At 7:15, after dropping off at daycare, I hurried to the firm. I worked in accounting at a small mid-level firm. There were no advancement opportunities, and the salary barely covered expenses. But it gave me one important thing: time. I could leave at 5 p.m. I would rush through the market, pick up my son, and head back to the kitchen. By 8 p.m., the food on the table was cold. ate while watching his favorite superhero show. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" the boy asked, lifting his head with a mouthful of rice. "Daddy is busy. He's saving people," I answered like an automaton. This response seemed to satisfy the child. His father was a hero. The child didn't know that to be a hero to others, his father was absent from his own life. Then came the real burden. My father-in-law started getting sick. It was a mild stroke, but the after effects were quite severe. He struggled to walk, and his memory was failing. My mother-in-law had always been fragile and lacked strength. It was worrying to leave the two elderly parents alone in the family's old neighborhood. "How about we bring your mom and dad to our condo?" I suggested to Langston. We lived in a 3-bedroom apartment. In fact, the apartment was a gift from my parents. Langston had only contributed a little for the renovation. Langston frowned. He barely looked up from the papers spread across his desk. "You handle it. I've been really busy lately. I'm in the middle of evaluating a new research project. Do whatever you think is best." Once again, he delegated the responsibility to me without a second thought. So I brought my in-laws home, and almost immediately, the condo felt smaller, heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in. A smell of medicinal herbs and liniment mixed in the air. Another repetitive cycle was added to my life. Besides grocery shopping and caring for my son, I had to manage my father-in-law's medication, prepare his dietary meals, and give him massages. My mother-in-law was a difficult person. She didn't like seeing me wash my father-in-law's clothes in the washing machine. "Daughter, your father-in-law's clothes need to be hand-washed to get them clean, and you wash them with Wami's things? That's disgusting," I patiently explained. "Mother, I wash them separately. Grandpa's clothes went in separately with a sanitizing boil cycle." She gave me a withering look. What a waste of electricity. In my day, there were no machines. Everything was done by hand. "Give them to me, I'll do it." But as she said it, she gasped. I had to help her sit back down in the chair. "Mother, please rest. I can do it." Langston, of course, was completely detached from all these invisible conflicts. He left the house at dawn and didn't return until his parents were asleep. At home, his role was nothing more than that of a luxury guest. Sometimes he would buy a kit for specialty broth and say, "Prepare this for father and mother." I don't have time these days because of the promotion review. I looked at the soup box and then at him. Part of that promotion was built on my sweat, my tears, and my patience. The invisible cracks grew wider. The nights my father-in-law collapsed from lack of attention, and I had to rush him to the ER alone. Where was Langston? He was abroad at an international medical conference in Chicago. The moments my mother-in-law would lecture me. "Langston sacrifices so much for this house. You who are home taking care of the household should look after your in-laws well so that your son's father doesn't have worries. But I see you are too careless. A wife must know how to support her husband." I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was messy, my clothes were old, I hadn't had time for a manicure all year. I had forgotten what perfume smelled like. I was just Zora, my in-law's daughter-in-law, mother, and the wife of a perpetually busy man. I started getting tired. It wasn't physical fatigue, but mental exhaustion. I no longer wanted to talk to Langston. Our conversations were limited to, "Did Wami behave today? How are your parents? Did you pay the HOA fees?" We slept in the same bed, but each with our backs turned to the other. His breathing was regular, but it felt distant. Some nights I felt him secretly looking at his phone under the covers, but I didn't want to ask. I didn't have the energy to feel jealous or suspicious. I just wanted to sleep, a deep, dreamless sleep. While the weight of my in-laws crushed my shoulders, my body began sending signals. It was a warm summer night. After giving my father-in-law his medication, putting my mother-in-law and Kame to bed, I could finally go to the bathroom. I was exhausted. I just wanted to shower quickly and sleep. As I soaked my chest, my hand paused. There was something in my left breast, deep inside. It wasn't a pimple. It was hard and immobile, like a small pebble embedded under my skin. My heart skipped a beat. I tried to calm down and pressed more carefully. It was there, unmistakable. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was nothing, that maybe my mammary glands were swollen because my menstrual cycle was approaching. But a cold unease began to settle deep in my chest, refusing to be ignored. I waited for Langston. That night, he came home late as usual, nearly 11 p.m., and the waiting only made the silence heavier. He smelled faintly of alcohol but was lucid. "Honey," I called him softly as he changed out of his uniform. "I just found something." Despite being my husband, talking to Langston about my body was still awkward. He was always so professional, so impeccable. "What is it?" he asked, his voice irritated. He must have had a bad day. "I feel a small lump in my left breast," I said, pointing to the spot. Langston sighed, the sigh of someone interrupted. "Where? Lie down. Let me see." I lay on the bed. The bedroom's soft yellow light was on. He didn't turn on the main light. His God's hands, the ones that had excised hundreds of tumors, rested on my chest. It wasn't the loving touch of a husband. It was the cold, skillful hand of a doctor. He pressed with proficiency and detachment. "Here," he asked. "Yes, a little lower." He pressed a couple more times. It didn't take 30 seconds. "It's just a small nodule," he diagnosed, withdrawing his hand and entering the bathroom. I jumped up. "A nodule? But it's hard." "Oh, here we go with your nonsense again." Langston's voice came from the bathroom, along with the sound of running water. "It's just a fibroadenoma. Women your age who have given birth and breastfed, they all get them. It's normal." "But wouldn't it be better if I got an ultrasound tomorrow?" I was still uneasy. Langston came out drying his hair. "You don't trust my word?" "I'm an oncologist. If I say it's fine, it's fine. Why waste money and time on an ultrasound? Our hospital is full of patients. You'd have to wait a long time for an ultrasound. Don't worry about nonsense." His words sounded reasonable. He was the expert, and he was my husband. He wouldn't possibly wish anything bad on me. I scolded myself for being too sensitive, for worrying too much. I told myself to let it go, to stop overthinking. "Go to sleep now," Langston said. He turned off the light and got into bed. "I have to leave early tomorrow. I'm exhausted with this promotion review." He turned over, and in less than 5 minutes, his breathing became regular. I lay in the darkness. My right hand was unconsciously placed on my left breast. That small nodule was still there, lurking with a threatening presence. I decided to believe him. I had to believe him. I had no one else to rely on. Despite Langston's professional reassurance, my mind was not at peace. But life didn't give me time to obsess over that nodule. My in-laws' misfortune arrived like a flood, sweeping everything away. My father-in-law had weakened notably since his last mild stroke, and one cold winter morning, while I was feeding him hot cereal, he suffered a second, much more severe stroke. The right half of his body was paralyzed, and he lost consciousness completely. I called an ambulance and Langston. The ambulance arrived first. Langston didn't answer his phone until 30 minutes later. "You take father to the hospital. I'm in the middle of a complex procedure and can't leave. This patient is related to someone very important. Take care of father first. Call me if anything happens." Thus began my hellish days. My father-in-law was in the ICU, and then transferred to the neurology floor. He was bedridden there for 6 months. 6 long months. I became a transportation service between the Firmwami's daycare and the hospital. My schedule was suffocating. Wake up at 5:30, prepare a large pot of hot cereal, 1 part for my mother-in-law, and the rest in a thermos to take to my father-in-law. 6:30, feed my son, and at 7 take him to daycare. 7:30 I faced the biting winter wind of Atlanta on my scooter to get to the hospital. I had to arrive before the doctor's rounds. I changed my father-in-law's diapers, cleaned him up, and gave him massages. The hospital smell of disinfectant and excrement permeated my hair and clothes. When I finished, I rushed to the firm. I was always the last one to arrive, sneaking to my desk, avoiding my boss's gaze. At lunchtime, while others went out to eat or grab coffee, I rushed back to the hospital with the thermos to spoon-feed my father-in-law pured soup through a feeding tube. He couldn't swallow, and the soup would dribble down his chin. I patiently wiped it away over and over. My mother-in-law was too frail to stay up all night or endure these scenes. She was in charge of Wami's dinner at home, but even that rarely went well. At 5 p.m., I left work and hurried to pick up my son again. I stopped at the market and prepared dinner at home. Dinner for the three of us, my son, his grandmother, and me, was always rushed. After dinner, I helped Wami with his homework and left him with my mother-in-law. At 8 p.m., I returned to the hospital to relieve the caregiver I had barely managed to hire for a few hours. During those 6 months, I lost exactly 22 pounds. My clothes hung loosely, my face had an ashy pore, and my eyes were sunken. I wandered through my own house like a ghost. And Langston, where was he? Still busy. The promotion to Chief of Service and a national research project seemed to occupy all his time. "I'm in the middle of the promotion process," he told me over the phone. His voice sounded tired. "This time it's crucial. My entire future career depends on it. Just hold on a little longer, please. They are our parents. I know it's hard on you, but you're my wife. You understand, right?" I understood. I understood so much that there was nothing left to say. I managed to cover the hospital expenses alone. His salary, according to him, had to be allocated to business meals and contacts for that promotion. My savings, my meager accountant's salary, vanished instantly into medicine and diapers. Sometimes Langston would stop by the hospital. He'd come elegantly dressed in his service coat and stand at the doorway of the room. He would look at his father, look at me, and say, "You're making a huge effort. Keep going." He never touched his father. He never changed a diaper. He was disgusted by the mess. His God's hands were meant for holding a scalpel, not for cleaning his own father's excrement. My mother-in-law, far from pitying me, would scold me. "You have to take good care of your father-in-law. If anything happens to him, it will be due to your bad luck. Langston is a man who does great things, and instead of helping him, you shouldn't be a burden. But I see you are too neglectful. A woman must know how to maintain her husband." I swallowed the tears when I heard those words. A burden. I was the burden. The small nodule in my left breast, sometimes ACHD, reminding me of its presence. But I didn't have time. I had to care for my father-in-law. I had to be the sensible daughter-in-law of this family. My father-in-law passed away. He breathed his last on a torrential, rainy afternoon. That day, I was at the office trying to finish a late quarterly report. The hospital called me. I raced like a moth toward a light, but I arrived too late. I stood in silence by the bed. After 6 long months, he had finally been freed. And perhaps so had I. I called Langston. The phone, whose voice I had always longed to hear, now only emitted a monotonous tone. No one answered. I called once, then twice, then a third time. Still nothing. Only silence. Finally, I called his service office. The on-duty nurse answered calmly. "Ma'am, Dr. Langston Dubois is traveling abroad. He left for a conference in Chicago and won't be back until the weekend." Chicago. A conference. His father had died, and he had gone to a conference. I felt my throat burn. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. I took care of all the paperwork alone. I notified the relatives back home. I contacted the funeral home. Langston returned. He arrived just in time for the burial. He took the fastest flight from Chicago and went directly from the airport to the funeral home. He wore a black suit, sunglasses, and his face was drawn from the red-eye flight. He entered and embraced my mother-in-law to comfort her. "Mother, I'm here now. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for Father's last moment." People looked at him with compassion. Langston is such a good son, but what bad luck. Not to be home when his father passes, but it was for an international matter that brings honor to the family. Nothing could be done. No one looked at me. No one saw how I had lived the last 6 months. No one knew that I had prepared everything from the shroud to the casket. I, in my plain black mourning clothes, stayed in the background like a shadow. Langston, in his black suit and sunglasses, was the protagonist of this tragedy. The grief over the loss of her husband, coupled with the emotional shock, weakened my mother-in-law, who was already frail. She became even weaker. 3 months after my father-in-law's funeral, she also fell ill. This time, she wasn't in the hospital for long. It was severe pneumonia. An elderly woman's resistance was exhausted. She became bedridden at home, and I started the care cycle again. "Zora." She took my hand. It was a skeletal hand. "You're a good girl. Langston was lucky to find you." I didn't know whether to be happy or sad about this final compliment. My mother-in-law passed away. Another funeral. This time, Langston didn't go on a trip. His promotion review had ended. He had been officially appointed chief of service. He again took the lead and managed everything. He hired the best funeral service, received condolences, and thanked attendees. People praised him again. Dr. Langston Dubois is a true pillar for his family. Even though his parents have passed away one after another, he handles everything perfectly. I went back to the background. I boiled water, poured tea, prepared the food for the offerings, faithfully fulfilling the role of wife and daughter-in-law that society expected. After 2 funerals, our savings were depleted. The condolence money, according to Langston, had to be used to pay off the debts he had incurred for his new chief of service position's representation expenses. I didn't ask any more questions. I was too tired. When I returned to the office after my leave for the funerals and caregiving, my boss called me in. "Zora," she said, looking at me with an apologetic expression, "I know your situation well. You've been through a lot, but as you know, accounting work requires concentration and continuity. You've barely been in the office in the last year." I knew what she was going to say. "The firm has decided to give the head accountant position to Isabel. You have more experience, but frankly your contribution this year has been nearly zero. You've taken too many leaves." I nodded. "Yes, I understand. I lost my opportunity for promotion, the opportunity I had been waiting for 3 years. I sacrificed my career, my time, and my health to fulfill the role of a devoted daughter-in-law. And now I had lost everything." I left my boss's office and looked out the window. The Atlanta sky was gray. Just then, my left breast began to ache again. Langston's little nodules somehow seemed to have grown. While I lost my only chance for promotion, Langston prospered. He was officially appointed chief of service, the very position he had been so busy chasing and had had to make so many contacts for while his parents were sick. Langston organized a celebration party, a grandiose affair at a fancy restaurant. He invited senior colleagues and people I didn't know at all. As his wife, I had to stand by his side, smiling and greeting the guests. I wore an old dress that was a bit too tight, trying to conceal my rounder body and my haggarded face. Langston was dazzling. He wore a tailored suit, his hair perfectly styled, and he looked 10 years younger. He went from table to table, toasting, laughing, and chatting animatedly. "Congratulations, Dr. Dubois. You have a brilliant future ahead." "Dr. Dubois is not only brilliant, but he also has such solid support at home," a colleague told me, raising his glass toward me. I forced a smile. Support? I was the support that was in tatters and had lost my own career. When the party ended and we were alone, I said, "Honey, about the lump in my chest. It seems bigger lately, and sometimes it hurts." Langston was in a good mood. He waved his hand. "Oh, worrying again. It's because you think too much. You're stressed after all the family stuff. Relax. I already told you it was fine." His confidence made me doubt myself, but my body told me otherwise. That nodule was no longer a pebble. It was like a small, hard date pit embedded under the skin. Just then, the firm organized its annual medical checkup. It was mandatory. Like every year, I requested the checkup at a private general hospital the firm had an agreement with. It wasn't Langston's hospital. Without much thought, I simply followed the procedure. 2 days later, I received the results via email. I opened the file and glanced at it. Cholesterol a little high, mild fatty liver, common office worker ailments. I scrolled down to the end of the conclusions and froze. Mammography, ultrasound, upper outer quadrant of the left breast. An irregular bordered hypoechoic mass is observed. Vertical growth size 0.7 by 0.9 in. BI-RADS category 5. I'm not a doctor, but I know how to use Google BADS 5. Next to it was a description. Imaging findings typical of malignancy. Very high probability of malignancy, more than 95%. Very high probability of malignancy. The report in my hands trembled. I called Langston immediately. "I'm in a meeting now," he said curtly. "What is it?" "Come home right now," I yelled at him. It was the first time I had ever raised my voice. "It's urgent." That afternoon, Langston came home looking upset. I threw the checkup report onto the table. Look, this is your little nodule. Langston picked up the paper and read it, squinting. I saw the muscles in his face twitch slightly, but in just a second he regained his professional calm. They're all money grubbers, he sneered. Old equipment, incompetent doctors. As soon as they see something a little strange, they write by RADS 5 to scare patients and make them get expensive additional tests. They're scammers. But it clearly says the probability of malignancy is very high. My voice broke. What does it matter if it's high or low? Listen to me, Langston said, putting the paper down. You are my wife. If I don't worry about you, who will? Tomorrow. Take the day off work. Come to our hospital. I will do the tests again. I'll look at the ultrasound myself. You only need to trust the results from our hospital. His words were like a sedative, calming the storm inside me. Yes, he was my husband, the best specialist. How could a private hospital possibly compare to a university hospital? The next day, I went to Langston's hospital, and he led me quietly through the back door, as if shielding me from the world outside. No number, no waiting time. He took me to the best ultrasound room in his service. Lie down, he said in a soft voice. He himself drew the curtains, turned off the lights, leaving only the faint glow of the monitor. He himself applied the cold gel to my chest. I lay there, looking at the ceiling, listening to the click of the mouse. Langston moved the ultrasound transducer for much longer than usual. Black and white images I couldn't understand flashed across the screen. You see, he finally said, "What did I tell you?" My heart leaped. Look at this. He pointed to the screen. Smooth edges, horizontal growth, no signs of infiltration. It's just fibrocystic change, a fibroadenoma. Benign. It's benign. I sighed with relief. Yes, I'll give you the RADS 3 report. A lesion with a high probability of being benign, a malignancy probability lower than 2%. You only need a follow-up every 6 months. But that hospital is a mess, Langston interrupted, wiping the gel off my chest firmly. Do they even know how to do an ultrasound? Do you trust me, or do you trust them? I trust you, honey, I whispered. But shouldn't we do a biopsy just to be sure? Langston looked at me, a strange, inexplicable look. You like pain? He laughed, suddenly. A core needle biopsy is sticking a needle the thickness of a chopstick into your chest. It hurts like hell. There's also a risk of bruising or infection. Your results are clearly benign. Why waste money and risk introducing an illness into your body? He stood up and turned on the light. Listen, don't worry about anything. Go home, eat well, sleep well, don't stress. I'll do a checkup every 6 months. I got dressed again. The fear of yesterday had disappeared, replaced by infinite relief. How could I have doubted him? I was ungrateful. Despite being so busy, he had worried about my unnecessary sensitivity. I left the ultrasound room feeling more grateful than ever to my husband, completely unaware that I had just stepped across the threshold of death. The relief I felt after Langston's ultrasound didn't last long, not because I doubted him, but because another incident occurred. It was a cold, late autumn night. Langston was busy again. This time, it was an emergency surgery for a critical patient. He sent me a text at 6 p.m., saying he would be very late, and that Wami, and I shouldn't wait up for him and should go to sleep. I was used to it. He's my hero, after all. I prepared dinner for Wami. The child was especially fussy that day and didn't want to eat. He said he was tired. I touched his forehead, and he had a slight fever. What's wrong? I worried. I'm cold. The boy snuggled into my arms. I gave him some fever medicine and put him to bed early. I thought it would be a simple cold, but in the middle of the night, I woke up startled, not by a noise, but by an abnormal silence. Kamei, who always slept soundly, was breathing strangely, a whistling, fragmented gasp. I turned on the bedroom light and was horrified. The boy lay burning like a coal, his lips dry and his face flushed. I shook him. Can you hear me? The child weakly opened his eyes and closed them again, starting to rave. Mommy, the robot, the red robot. Febrile convulsions. I ran to the medicine cabinet to find the thermometer. 103.6 degrees. I felt like someone was squeezing my heart. I had to take my son to the hospital immediately. But Langston? My hand shook as I grabbed the phone and dialed his number. The number you have dialed is turned off or out of range. Turned off? No, he's in surgery. He won't be able to use his phone in the operating room. I repeated it to myself like a mantra, trying to stay calm, but my patience was already fraying. I couldn't wait. I hurriedly put more clothes on the child, wrapped him in a light blanket, and rushed out of the house. At 11 p.m., the apartment building was silent. With the child in one arm, I pressed the elevator button with the other. I went down to the lobby and asked the concierge to call me a cab. To the Children's Hospital emergency room, please. That night was a nightmare. I ran alone with my son in my arms through several rooms. The blood analysis room, the X-ray room, cried inconsolably when they drew blood. I cried with him. I felt so helpless and alone. I kept calling Langston. Every 5 minutes, his phone was still off. What kind of operation lasts so long? What kind of operation requires him to turn off his phone? The doctor said Wam had acute pneumonia, that it was lucky I had brought him in time, and that he had to be admitted immediately to start antibiotic treatment. By 3 a.m., finally stabilized in a hospital bed, he had an IV drip in his small arm. He fell asleep, exhausted. I sat beside him, worn out. I pulled out my phone again. The same mechanical voice answered. I started to feel uneasy, turning off the phone completely during an operation. A surgeon should always have their phone on a special mode in case of an emergency. At least they should be reachable by the nurses. I dialed another number, the landline number for the oncology office where Langston worked. A sleepy-voiced nurse answered, "Yes, oncology." "Hello?" I tried to keep my voice as calm as possible. "Is Dr. Langston Dubois still on service?" "I'm his wife." The nurse sounded surprised. "Who would be on service at this hour? Dr. Dubois isn't on call tonight." "No," I stammered. "He told me he had emergency surgery, that he'd been operating since the afternoon." "Surgery?" The nurse yawned. "What surgery?" "I've been here since the afternoon, and there hasn't been an operation like that." Dr. Dubois left right at 5:30 p.m. I saw him get his car keys and go to the parking lot. He said he had an important commitment and couldn't have dinner with us. He left at 5:30. I hung up the phone. My hands were colder than the late autumn night air in the hospital hallway. I was sitting in the Children's Hospital corridor, stunned. The words of the on-duty nurse from Langston's service echoed in my ears. He left right at 5:30 p.m., but he had sent me a text at 6 o'clock saying he had emergency surgery. A blatant, cruel lie. While his son was delirious with a high fever, where was he? Why did he lie? An important commitment. What commitment was more important than the surgery he had invented? An important commitment that required him to turn off his phone all night. The anger began to rise, an anger that surpassed the tiredness and fear, but I quickly suppressed that feeling. I couldn't break down. My son was here. At 4 a.m., I decided to go back home. The nurse would watch. I needed to get more clothes and things for my son. And most importantly, I had to find out what Langston's important commitment was. I took a taxi home. The house was terribly silent. I turned the key and opened the door. The living room was dark. I went into the bedroom. Langston was home. He was sleeping, deeply asleep in our bed, like the dead. His work uniform was carelessly thrown onto a chair, and his phone was charging on the nightstand. He had been home for quite some time. He had arrived, showered, put his phone on charge, and gone to bed. While his son and I were fighting for our lives in the hospital, I stood there watching him. I felt something inside me shatter into 1,000 pieces. I didn't wake him. I didn't scream. I simply slipped silently into the bathroom and turned on the faucet, letting the sound of running water drown out the chaos inside me. I needed to wash my face. I needed to clear my head. The sound of the water woke Langston. He came out groggy, his hair tousled. "You're back," he yawned. "Did the operation finish?" "Ah!" He still remembered his performance. He thought I was the one who had been operating. It wasn't me. My voice was hoarse. "Wami has acute pneumonia with a high fever. He's admitted to the Children's Hospital." Langston jumped up. "What? Why? Why didn't you call me?" His face was filled with concern, a perfect expression of worry. "I called you." I looked him directly in the eyes. Hundreds of times it was off. "Oh. Ah." Langston scratched his head, perplexed. "I must have run out of battery. I'm so sorry. That operation was brutal. When I finished, I was so exhausted I didn't worry about my phone." "Where did you operate?" I asked him. "At our hospital." "No. In your service. They said you left at 5:30 p.m., I said, articulating every word. Langston froze. His fake smile disappeared. He looked at me, and I knew he knew that I knew. "You must have misheard." He tried to salvage the situation. "I was operating at a private clinic. It was something unofficial. That's why I had to keep my phone off." "Stop," I interrupted him. "Where have you been?" Langston was silent for a long time, then sighed. "Okay, I don't want to hide it from you. I had dinner with some colleagues today, had a few drinks, put my phone on silent, and missed the calls. I'm sorry. I didn't know Kami was sick." He moved to hug me. "Honey, I'm sorry. I messed up. Don't be mad. Let's go see our son right now." He was acting as if everything were fine. If I had been yesterday's Zora, I would have believed him, softened, and comforted myself, telling myself he was just a little immature, that he had been harmlessly playful. But tonight's Zora was different. Tonight, I saw through the act. I dodged his embrace. "Change your clothes." Langston seemed surprised by my coldness, but he didn't ask further. We went to Sequam. Langston acted like an exemplary father. He asked the doctor about everything, caressed the child, and urged me to eat breakfast. At noon, Winnemie's condition improved a little. He said, "Stay here, with I have to go to the service." Something urgent came up. I nodded. He left, and I sat there. Lies. Everything was lies. The operation was a lie. The dinner with colleagues was a lie. Someone who has dinner with colleagues doesn't turn off their phone and arrive home impeccable, as if they came from far away. And suddenly, I remembered a detail. Last night when he returned and tried to hug me to apologize, his hand rested on my shoulder and then reflexively slid down and stopped for a brief instant over the lump on my left breast. Just 1 second. A very light touch before he immediately withdrew it. It wasn't a loving or casual contact. It was a touch of inspection, like a farmer feeling a pig to see if it had fattened up enough for slaughter. A chill ran down my spine. No, it can't be. What am I thinking? He's my husband, my son's father. But that small nodule he said was benign, was still there, and it was growing. Since that night, when Woods admitted, something between Langston and me was broken forever. No more reproaches or questions about how we were doing. I took care of my son at the hospital. He went to work. We were like two strangers living under the same roof, exchanging only basic information about our son. And a week after Wami was discharged, she appeared. I received a WhatsApp message from an unknown number. "Hi Zora, this is Scylla. I'm a friend of Langston's. Could we have coffee? I have something to tell you." Scylla, the name sounded familiar. I had once investigated Langston's Facebook thoroughly, reviewing posts from more than 10 years ago. A woman who smiled cheerfully next to a college-age Langston. His first love, his great lost love. The one Langston's friends sometimes joked about. I never paid it any mind. Everyone has a youthful love. "Langston's friend," I replied cautiously. "Okay, I'll meet you at the Sweet Georgia Cafe." "Great, I'll wait for you there." She was decisive, self-assured, and didn't give me a chance to refuse. Curiosity and a bad feeling led me there. I wanted to know if Langston's important commitment the night my son fell ill had anything to do with this friend. I put on an old office dress and hastily pulled back my hair. When I arrived at the cafe, she was already sitting there by the window. The moment I saw Scylla, I understood why they called her his great lost love. She was beautiful, a pure and sophisticated beauty. She wore a cream-colored silk dress, her hair was softly wavy, and her makeup was so subtle it looked like she wasn't wearing any. Her aura, that of a loved woman who lives for herself, hit me directly. She was my polar opposite. I was Zora, the homemaker, chubby and disheveled, with hair tangled from the exhaustion of caring for a sick child. She was Scylla, stunning and elegant. Scylla smiled softly when she saw me. "Hello, Zora. I'm Scylla. Have a seat." I sat across from her. I ordered you some unsweetened orange juice. Langston said you've been on a diet lately. A quick, precise preemptive strike. Langston had told her about my diet. Thank you. Water is fine, I replied, keeping my voice as steady as I could. I recently returned from the States, Selah began without hesitation. A little over a year ago, Langston and I reconnected. I remained silent. I let her talk. I don't know how much you know about Langston and me, but we loved each other very much before. And what does that have to do with me? I asked her. Selah smiled, still a soft smile, but her gaze was sharp. It has to do with you because he never stopped loving me, even after marrying you. I clenched my hands under the table. You know something? Selah took a sip of her tea. Your Langston is a romantic. In college, when I got sick, he jumped the fence of the girls' dorm late at night to bring me a bowl of hot broth. I suddenly remembered that in 10 years of marriage, Langston had never cooked for me once. And Selah continued, with dreamy eyes, he wrote my name with candles on the sports field. He said I was the light of his life. I felt nauseated. Those were things I only saw in soap operas. My husband, the serious man I only knew from conferences and promotions, was capable of doing something so cheesy. Really? I arched an eyebrow. I didn't know he had that side. And I've been living with him for 10 years. A flash of triumph crossed Selah's face for an instant. Believe it or not, it's true. He probably married you because of family pressure. He needed a wife who would care for his parents and maintain the home. And you, Zora, you've played that role perfectly. Was she complimenting me or insulting me? I looked at Selah directly in the eyes. You didn't call me here just to brag about the past. What do you want? My directness seemed to surprise Selah. She stopped smiling. Yes, I don't want to beat around the bush, Selah said. And then she played her winning card. Do you remember the night your son was admitted with a high fever? Selah's question was like a lightning bolt from the sky. I froze. How did she know that night? That night, Selah said with a voice tinged with false guilt. I called him. I had a problem. I'd had too much to drink. Langston had to take care of me. Had to take care of her. I repeated the phrase, feeling disgust. My son was raving in the hospital, and he, turning off his phone and lying about an operation, had gone to take care of her. I'm sorry. Selah lowered her head. It's my fault. I didn't know Kame was sick. Langston didn't know either. When he found out the next morning, he felt terrible. Terrible. That man who arrived home at 4 a.m. and slept like the dead felt terrible. And his trips abroad. My voice trembled. When your father-in-law passed away, he was traveling to Chicago. Selah raised her head. Her eyes were full of compassion. Zora Langston never went to Chicago. He came to see me in the States. The world began to spin. And everything started to crumble. One lie had led to another. My entire marriage was built on lies. While his father was dying, he crossed half the world to see his old love. Do you remember the necklace he gave you for your last anniversary? Selah asked, suddenly changing the subject. I touched my neck. I wasn't wearing it, but I remembered the white gold necklace with a small stone. It was the first expensive gift he had given me in years. I chose it. Selah smiled. He doesn't know how to choose gifts for women. He asked me. He told me to buy something simple for his wife. Not too expensive. Something to appease her. His wife. Not too expensive. The anger disappeared, and in its place I felt an extreme emptiness. I felt so stupid, so pathetic. I was proud of that gift. I thought that despite being busy, he remembered me. It turns out I was just the recipient of an object chosen by my husband's mistress. Why? I asked. Why are you telling me all this? Selah sighed and put down the teacup. Because I don't want to be the second one anymore. I'm a woman too, and I need my place. I looked at her, waiting for her next words. Langston and I have been seeing each other for over a year. Since I came back, we've always wanted each other. Langston says he's in your debt because you took care of his parents and raised his son. He doesn't want to hurt you. He's afraid you won't be able to handle the shock. In your debt. Doesn't want to. I laughed. He didn't want to, so he cheated on me. He didn't want to, so he ignored the lump in my chest. I blurted it out without thinking and instantly regretted it. Why had I told her that? Surprise crossed Selah's eyes. A lump? What lump? I remained silent. Ah, Selah said, as if she understood. You mean that lump Langston said was benign? My heart pounded. How? How did she know? Langston told me. Seela shrugged. He said you worried, over nothing, that he had checked it thoroughly, and it was just a simple fibroadenoma. And she laughed. He said, you've become a paranoid old woman lately. A paranoid old woman. My husband, the oncologist, had turned my illness into a joke to tell his mistress. I jumped up. I couldn't sit there for another second. Where are you going? Seela looked at me still with that serene expression. I'm not finished yet. I have nothing to talk about with you. Sit down, Zora. Seela's voice suddenly became firm. You had better listen until the end. Our future, yours and mine, is at stake. I don't know what force made me sit back down. Maybe it was the curiosity of someone who finds themselves at a dead end. I wanted to see just how far her cruelty could reach. I sank into the chair. Fine, talk, Seela smiled, clearly satisfied, then softened her expression, returning to a gentle demeanor. Langston and I have already talked about it. We want to be together. I want to give Langston a real family. He's too tired of pretending with you. A real family? I asked. And what are woman I? You and Clement are the past and the responsibility, Seela said without hesitation. And I am his future. I just want a family. I want my son to have a father. Your son? I looked at Seela's flat stomach. I didn't understand. I'm not pregnant, Seela said, as if reading my thoughts. I mean that I want to have a child with Langston, and my child must have a father from the moment he is born. So you want me to get a divorce? It's best for everyone, Seela nodded. If you leave, Langston won't let you go empty-handed. He told me he'll give you a good financial settlement. Compensation? I laughed to myself. What would he compensate me with? His lies. Money? Seela said. He'll give you money, a lot of money. Enough for you and your son to live comfortably. That way, you won't have to do that boring accounting job anymore. She spoke of my life as if she were negotiating a commodity. Look, Seela leaned toward me, lowering her voice. Look at yourself. You're not young anymore. You're heavy, disheveled. Do you think you can find anyone better without Langston? But Langston is chief of service, a professional. He needs a wife who is his equal when he goes to social events. You can't be that. I can. She was right. Every one of her words was like a dagger to my heart, but it no longer hurt. Everything had simply become clear. I was silent for a moment. I looked at Seela, observing her carefully. From her expensive silk dress to the fine watch on her wrist, she was perfect. Are you finished? I asked her. Seela was surprised. She expected me to scream, to grab her hair, or at least to break down, but I didn't. What do you mean? I mean, are you finished talking? Yes, I think so. I hope you think carefully. This will be the best offer for you. All right, now it's my turn, I said, surprised at how calm my own voice sounded. I took out my cell phone, placed it on the table, and activated the voice recorder. First, I said, thank you for telling me all this. Your romantic past, the necklace story, the trips abroad. It's all been very helpful. Seela's face began to harden. Second, you say Langston will give me compensation. I laughed. Do you know the condo we live in is my separate property? My parents bought it for me, and he only contributed a little money to renovate the kitchen. Seela's eyes widened. What? Langston said it was his house. He lied to you again, I shrugged, just as he lied to me. He's a pathological liar. Third, I continued, not giving her time to assimilate it. You say he's chief of service and a professional, but do you know that all the money he's earned has gone into his parents' funeral expenses? And the representation costs for that position, oh, and the plane tickets to go see you in the States. Our savings, which were really my money, are already gone. Right now, he has nothing. No, that can't be. Seela began to panic, and finally I concluded. You say you want a family, a place. You've asked me to leave, but by what right? By the right of a mistress who destroys someone else's home. Langston and I truly love each other, Seela shouted, losing her composure. We truly love each other. I stood up and picked up my phone. Do you know what I was doing before you arrived? I was listening to this very recording. I pressed the play button. Sila's voice filled the quiet cafe. Because I don't want to be the second one anymore, he'll give you a good financial settlement. You're heavy, disheveled. I am his future. Pale as a ghost, Sila lunged for the phone, but I growled, "Don't do it," and held it firmly in my hand. I have many copies. I've recorded our entire conversation from when you were bragging about him jumping the dorm fence until you asked me to leave. Thank you for providing me with the perfect evidence of your adultery. Sila collapsed into the chair desolate. Goodbye, I said, putting the phone back in my purse. Miss Great Lost Love. I hope you have a brilliant future with a broke, pathological liar who just got caught by his wife. I turned and left, leaving behind a pale face and cold tea. Walking out of the cafe for the first time in years, I felt I was no longer a shadow. The afternoon wind blew strongly, but I didn't feel cold. I felt light, as if a weight of 1,000 lbs had been lifted from me. I didn't go straight home. I headed directly to the office of the attorney, Khalil. Khalil saw me and listened to the audio file I sent him via WhatsApp. He was young, but his gaze was sharp. Zora, Khalil said, his voice serious. This is crystal clear evidence of adultery. This sailor confessed everything herself. We initiate divorce proceedings immediately. I nodded. Yes, but that's not all. Khalil, please send this audio file to my husband right now. Khalil was slightly surprised, but he did as I asked. He wrote a brief email, attached the voice file, and sent it to Langston's work email address. I sat in Khalil's office and waited. In less than 5 minutes, my phone rang. It was Langston. I looked at Khalil and he nodded. I put it on speaker and answered, "Where are you?" Langston's voice was no longer that of the kind, gentlemanly chief of service. It was a snarl. "What the hell have you done? You dare to record Sila? Do you want to ruin my life?" I let him yell. "Come home right now. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied. My voice was strangely calm. "You heard everything, and so did I." "Zora," he shouted, "this is illegal. I can report you for invasion of privacy." I looked at Khalil. The young lawyer smiled and shook his head. "Langston," I said. For the first time in 10 years, I called him by his first name, not honey or love. "We're getting divorced. You have someone you truly love. You're tired of pretending with me, so I'm setting you free. Don't make things worse." Langston changed his tone. He realized he was at a disadvantage. "Zora, I'm sorry. Sela and I, it was just a fling. You are my wife, and Kwame is our son. Think about our son." "Did you think about our son?" I interrupted him. "When our son was delirious with a high fever, and you turned off your phone to go take care of your old love. Did you think about our son when your father was about to die, and you flew to the States to see her? Did you think about our son?" Langston faltered. "I don't need your excuses." "I don't want to hear them," I said firmly. "We don't have assets. The condo is mine. The savings were spent caring for your parents. You have nothing. As you told Sila. By what right will you give me compensation?" "Zora, don't be so cruel. I'm not the cruel one. Divorce. If you agree, we'll do it mutually and cleanly. If not, I'll go to trial with this recording. Think about it. What would happen if a respected chief of oncology were sued by his wife for adultery and an extramarital affair?" There was a long silence. I knew I had touched his weakest point. Not love or family, but the honor and career he had achieved by sacrificing everything. "Fine," he growled. "If that's what you want, so be it. Let's get divorced." He hung up. I turned off the phone and sighed deeply. It was over. 10 years of marriage decided in a 3-minute call. I suddenly remembered our wedding day. A wedding that followed a preset script. I, the docile and well-mannered 26-year-old accountant. He, the promising 30-year-old resident. We were presented as the perfect couple. My parents were satisfied that their daughter was marrying a doctor. His parents were satisfied to have a daughter-in-law who would take good care of the home. We didn't have the passionate love Sila spoke of. We had respect, or at least that's what I believed. I thought responsibility was enough in a marriage. I became a shadow in the background so he could shine. I thought my sacrifice was worth it. It turns out the whole thing was a comedy and I was the silliest clown in the show. The reason I could remain calm when facing Sila and talking to Langston wasn't because I was superhumanly strong. It was because the Zora of that day was not the same Zora of a month earlier. My change began that night in the hospital alone with Kwame, delirious with fever in my arms, sitting in the cold white corridor, watching my small son struggle to breathe while my husband's phone was off. I realized I couldn't depend on anyone. The man I called my husband, the man for whom I had sacrificed my youth and career for his family, was not by my side when I needed him most. That fact was crueler than his infidelity. Infidelity can be born of desire, but abandoning your own child and wife in a life or death situation is cruelty to the core. Since that night, while I was still in the hospital, I began my own revolution. I no longer prepared elaborate dinners for someone who wouldn't return. I ordered takeout. I cooked simple dishes that my son and I liked. I no longer wore baggy house clothes. I threw all the old worn clothes away. I ordered some not too expensive but flattering and stylish clothes online. I signed up for an online exercise course. Every night when I fell asleep, I spread the yoga mat in the middle of the living room and exercised. I worked out like crazy, sweating profusely, but my mind felt lighter. I wasn't losing weight to please anyone. I was exercising to be healthy, to get rid of the anger and disappointment. I started learning how to apply makeup. I watched videos on how to line my eyes and put on lipstick. I realized that my face, previously haggarded and puffy, completely changed with a little lipstick. I started cooking for myself, preparing my favorite dishes, brewing herbal tea, and instead of spending the night cleaning the kitchen, I sat on the balcony to read a book. Langston noticed these changes, but he didn't care, too busy with his important matters. Perhaps he was even happy. I no longer scolded him. I left him alone. "You're a little strange lately," he said once carelessly, as he saw me put on lipstick before going to work. "What's strange about it?" I asked without looking at him. "You've changed. You're fixing yourself up." "I'm fixing myself up for me," I replied. "I can't live disheveled forever." He shrugged and left for work without saying anything more. It was this inner change that gave me strength. When Sila appeared with a victorious air, she was wrong. She thought I was still Zora, the heavy, disheveled homemaker who depended on her husband. She didn't know she was facing a reborn Zora. I no longer felt jealous because I no longer loved him. I didn't feel pain because I saw clearly who he was. I only felt disgust and a strange calm to gather evidence. The phone, recording all along, wasn't an impulsive act. It was preparation. I had known this day would come. The reason I remained calm in my confrontation with Sila was simple. I no longer considered Langston the center of my world. Now he was just a terrible man I had to eliminate from my life as soon as possible. The decision to divorce was made. The lawyer, Khalil, was preparing the papers. Since that call, Langston had been silent. He didn't come home. He probably ran to seek solace in his great lost love. I didn't care. But just when I thought I had everything under control, I received a piece of news. While scrolling through Facebook, I saw an obituary on a college classmate's personal page. It was Martia. "In memory of our dear friend Marta, you fought bravely." I froze. Marta. My accounting classmate Marta. I quickly sent a message to another friend. "Hey Marta, from our class. What happened? You didn't know?" The friend replied instantly. Marta had breast cancer. They discovered it last year, but it had already metastasized. She went very fast. Zora, poor thing with such young kids. Breast cancer. My phone dropped. My ears were ringing. Marta. I remember her. She was docile like me. She got married and had children. She also once complained that she was tired lately and felt a tightness in her chest. I remembered my in-laws' funerals, my own exhaustion, Langston's little nodule, his benign diagnosis, Brad's 3, his advice that a biopsy wasn't necessary because it would just hurt. True terror for the first time gripped my heart, the calm and confidence I had built with so much effort since the night my son fell ill. Since the confrontation with Sela vanished in an instant, the divorce, the infidelity, All of it suddenly seemed so trivial. What was important? Life? What if that lump? What if it wasn't benign? As Langston said, my friend Marta had died. She died of breast cancer. She was my age and had young children. Fear took hold of me, not fear of Langston or Seela, but fear of death. I was afraid to die. I was afraid to leave Wami alone in this world with a cruel father and a strange woman. I couldn't die. My son needed me. Marty's death was a wake-up call. It woke me up from the divorce war. There was another much more important war. One had to wage. The war for my own life. I needed to know the truth. I needed to know exactly what that lump in my chest was. And I knew I couldn't trust Langston. I had to trust myself. But before seeking the truth, there was one last thing I had to do. I had to test him one last time. I had to know if he was just an unfaithful bad husband or if he was truly a demon. I had to act. I had to act like the Zora of the past. The silly, gullible, scared Zora. Marta's death was the perfect excuse. I picked up my phone. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from disgust. I dialed Langston's number. He hadn't returned home in days since I asked for the divorce. He answered instantly. It seemed he was waiting too. His voice was dry and cold. What? Honey? I tried to make my voice tremble and sob. Langston. Honey, I'm so scared. I just found out my college classmate Marta has died. I started to cry. Very real tears. But not for Langston, but for Martia and my own stupidity. She also had breast cancer. And what? Langston's voice was still cold, but tinged with curiosity. I'm afraid about my lump. Honey, what if the private hospital was right? It hurts more lately. I'm afraid of dying, of ending up like Martia. Nonsense, he said curtly. But I noticed his tone of voice had changed. He was calculating. I messed up, I said, continuing the performance. I shouldn't have brought up the divorce. I was just so angry. But now I'm really scared. I only trust you. You're a doctor, and my husband. Could you examine me again? I won't trust anyone else. I'll only trust you. I threw the bait. The terrified wife who regrets asking for divorce and seeks reconciliation with the excuse of her health. An arrogant man like Langston, in a disadvantageous position due to his discovered infidelity, could not let this opportunity pass. The opportunity to appease me and continue with his plan at the same time. All right, he sighed. His voice had already softened with the attitude of a superior who forgives. Stop crying. I already told you it was fine. You're worrying over nothing. Come to the hospital tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll do one last ultrasound so you can feel at ease. Yes, thank you, honey, I said, with a voice full of false gratitude. I hung up the phone. The crying stopped instantly. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was wet with tears, but my eyes were ice cold. One last time, he was right. This would be the last time. The next morning, I wore a dress under a loose jacket. The phone in my jacket pocket had the voice recorder turned on. I went to his hospital, and as always, he guided me through the back door. We went to the same luxury ultrasound room. Lie down, he said with a calm voice, as if there had been no argument, as if Seela didn't exist. He had returned to his role as the professional husband. I lay down. The cold gel returned to my chest. He turned off the light. I'm scared. I'm scared of ending up like Martia. I repeated my performance, my voice trembling. Langston moved the transducer. I could feel his hand, his God's hands. This time he didn't take as long as the last time. I told you, he said with the confident voice of an expert. Unnecessary worries. So is it still there? It's the same benign bias 3. I'm the expert. Don't you trust my word? It's just a fibroadenoma. Your friend died because she found it late, and by an incompetent doctor. But you have me. His arrogance was astonishing. So a biopsy isn't necessary, right? I asked him. This was the key question. People say you have to do a biopsy to be sure. Langston chuckled as if I had said something silly. You like pain again? He repeated the same words as the last time. I already told you. A biopsy is a very thick needle they stick into you. It hurts a lot, and there's a risk of infection. Your lump is clearly benign. Why waste money and risk introducing an illness into your body? He put down the transducer and tossed me a paper towel. Wipe yourself off. Go home and stop thinking nonsense. We'll talk about the divorce calmly. Your health first. He spoke as if he were doing me a favor. I stood up and wiped my chest. My hands weren't trembling at all. Yes, I whispered. Okay. I left the ultrasound room. The phone in my jacket pocket was warm. I had gotten what I needed. The final proof. He knew I feared death. That I was confused after my friend's passing. And at that precise moment, he, the oncologist, used all his authority to advise me that I didn't need a biopsy. I stopped in the hospital hallway. I heard a clear click in my head. It wasn't my imagination. It was the sound of the last finest thread connecting me to him snapping. He wasn't just a bad husband. He was a demon. I didn't go home. I went straight to the attorney Khalil's office. Khalil turned pale when I played the second recording for him. Zora, Khalil stammered. He had to take off his glasses and clean them. This goes beyond medical negligence. He keeps repeating that a biopsy isn't necessary. Exactly, I said with a voice as cold as ice. But Khalil, haven't you noticed something strange? What? He's a doctor. If he wanted to kill me, why do it so clumsily? Why not prescribe a poison or make a mistake in surgery? Khalil frowned. You're right. This method is too passive. He simply did nothing. He only delayed your treatment. In a trial, he could argue it was a professional error in judgment. It would be very difficult to accuse him of attempted murder with malice. Then I said, we have to find a motive. A motive strong enough for a doctor to betray the Hippocratic Oath. A motive? Khalil murmured. Love for this Scylla. But as you say, he's broke. What would he gain by marrying her and abandoning you? No, it's not love. I said, it's money. It has to be money. And at that precise moment, a vague memory crossed my mind. One afternoon, a long time ago, just after Wayne was born, Langston came home with a thick sheath of papers. Sign here, he said. I've taken out life insurance for the whole family. It's for your future, and the child's in case something happens to me. I was very moved. I signed without reading. I, the accountant who meticulously handled numbers every day, had signed the most important financial document of my life without thinking. Khalil. I grabbed his hand. Insurance, life insurance. Khalil froze. Zora, don't tell me that. I have to go home right now. I have to find that contract. I ran out of Khalil's office and hailed a cab to the apartment. Please let Langston still be with Scylla. The house was empty. I ran directly to the study. There was a small safe there that I had never touched. The password was Wame's birthday. I opened the safe. Inside were the house deeds, in my name, empty savings passbooks, and a dark blue file. Life insurance contract. I opened it with trembling hands. The original contract insured Langston Dubois. Beneficiaries, wife Zora, son Wam Dubois. Capital upon death, $1 million. No, this wasn't it. There had to be something else. I searched through the entire file and finally found it. An inter-filed contract modification rider. This rider had been signed 8 months ago. 8 months? When was that? Right after I first discovered the lump. Right after he, with his God's hands, touched my breast and diagnosed it as a small nodule. The contracting party, Langston Dubois, requests the modification and addition of the insurance contract on the insured party, his wife, Zora. Turn to the next page. Modifications increase in capital upon the death of the insured party, Zora, due to illness. And then the figure appeared $5 million. Sole beneficiary, husband, Langston Dubois. I collapsed onto the floor, the bundle of papers scattered. Now I understood. Everything fit together. The moment I told him about the lump, the moment he, as an expert, knew that nodule was problematic, the first thing he did was not take me to the hospital. The first thing he did was call the insurance company and increase my death capital to $5 million. He must have used the money from business dinners, from his parents' funerals, and probably a loan to pay the increased premium on my insurance. He wasn't in a promotion process. He was making an investment. Only after that did he calmly do the ultrasound, and when the BI-RADS-5 results from the firm ruined his plans, he had to use his authority to cover it up as a benign BI-RADS-3. He didn't want me to die too soon. He needed time for the insurance contract to take effect and for the waiting period to pass. But he also couldn't let me get treated. He wanted me to die naturally from a breast cancer illness, a death no one would suspect, a death that would give him $5 million. Sela love. It was all an excuse. He needed $5 million to start a new life with his young, beautiful mistress, after getting rid of his old, heavy wife. The important commitment the night my son fell ill, the trip abroad when his father died. All the money was used for this perfect plan. I no longer cried. I only felt a cold that chilled me to the bone, a cold more terrifying than death. The man who had slept beside me for 10 years had been patiently waiting for me to die. Like a farmer waiting for the rice to ripen. I couldn't stay in this house for another second. It wasn't a home. It was a trap Langston had set. A waiting room for death. I called Wami. The child was at my sister's house while I sorted out the divorce. Are you being good? Mommy is almost done. Soon I'll come get you and we'll go on a trip very far away. Yes. The boy's voice was heard on the other end of the phone. To the beach, Mommy. Yes, to the beach. I swallowed the knot in my throat with difficulty. We're going to the beach with Mommy. I hurriedly packed my clothes and Wami's into one suitcase. I grabbed the house deeds, all the documents in my name, my passport, and most importantly, the insurance contract. I called my boss. Boss, I'm resigning. Zora, what's going on? She was surprised. I have some family problems and I'm sick. I need treatment, I told her, and it was true. I'm sorry. I hung up. I left the apartment without looking back. I went to pick up Wami. I told my sister I had to take the child far away for treatment, that I needed a quiet place. My sister didn't ask any more questions and gave me some money. I didn't go to the most famous oncology center where Langston might have contacts. I chose another large private cancer hospital, expensive but reliable, and most importantly, with no connection to Langston. I used my real name. I didn't hide. I came to fight. I presented all the documents to the chief of service, an elderly man, the BIADS. 5 results from the firm, and the benign BI-RADS, 3 results signed by the Chief of Service of the King Morehouse Medical Center, Langston Dubois. The Chief of Service put on his reading glasses and compared the 2 ultrasound reports. Without saying a word, he picked up the phone. Ultrasound room. Prepare yourselves. I have an urgent patient who needs a core needle biopsy right now. They took me to the examination room. This time there were no curtains or dim lights. Everything was brightly lit. A young female doctor performed the ultrasound, and the chief of service stood beside her, staring intently at the screen. Here he pointed to the screen. Irregular borders, vertical growth, infiltration, neovascularization. Whoever called this a BI-RADS-3 needs to go back to medical school. I lay there emotionless, and they performed the biopsy. The thick needle Langston talked about was plunged into my chest. It hurt. It hurt horribly. But this physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional pain I had suffered. At least this pain brought me the truth. Greater than snorts. Greater than 3 days later. 3 days that felt like 3 centuries. I sat across from the chief of service. Zora, he said slowly, the biopsy results are back. It is invasive ductal carcinoma. The stage is estimated to be 2B. My heart skipped a beat, but he emphasized. The good news is that the tumor has not metastasized distantly yet. The lung, liver, and bone CT scans are clean. Lymph node metastasis is suspected, but we can treat it. He looked me directly in the eyes and said, "You've simply been very lucky. The cure rate at this stage is very high. If you follow the treatment plan well, it can reach 90%. We will do the surgery first, followed by chemotherapy and radiation therapy." I burst into tears. This time, They were tears of liberation. I wasn't dead yet. My son wouldn't be orphaned. I asked him with a trembling voice, "Doctor, what if I had discovered this 8 months ago, but received a benign diagnosis and advice that I didn't need a biopsy?" The chief of service pounded the table. He was a man of strong character. "Who? What doctor made that diagnosis? Give me his name. That's a felony." If the biopsy had been done 8 months ago, it would probably have been stage 1. The tumor would not measure 2.2 centimeters like now, but only 1 centimeter. Conservative surgery would have been enough, and you might not have needed chemotherapy. He looked at me, diagnosing a BADS 5 tumor as a BADS 3. That's not simple medical negligence, that's malice. I got my answer. I had a diagnosis. I had hope for life. And I had proof of Langston's crime. Now was the time to fight back. With the official diagnosis and the furious confirmation from the chief of service, I knew what I had to do. Not only was I going to get a divorce, but I was going to expose Langston to the world. I contacted the attorney Khalil again. This time, it wasn't just an audio file. I had a thick medical file with the signature of a committee of specialists. A copy of the life insurance contract increased to $5 million. And the 2 decisive recordings, one with Sela admitting adultery and the other with Langston in his expert voice advising me not to get the biopsy. "My God, Zora," Khalil said. His voice was trembling. This is more than enough. We will not only initiate divorce proceedings but also a criminal complaint." The complaint wasn't for a single crime, but for 3. First, attempted insurance fraud. Second, violation of healthcare law with severe consequences. We would demonstrate malicious intent. Third, adultery and maintenance of a de facto relationship with the birth of an extramarital child. Langston, in fact, received the summons. I suppose he thought I was just bluffing. He thought I was the silly wife, Zora, who only knew how to cry. He called me. This time, his voice no longer snarled. It trembled. "Zora, are you crazy? You report me? Do you really want to ruin me?" "I'm not the one ruining you," I told him calmly over the phone. "I'm just saving myself and seeking justice. You had your chance. You could have just been a bad husband, but you chose to be a demon. I will lose everything. Aren't you thinking about our son? Our son will live without a father. Our son is better off without a father like you." I hung up. Langston and Sela, of course, hired the best lawyers. They began to argue that it was just an error in professional judgment, that the life insurance was a normal sign of a husband's concern, that the relationship with Sela was just an affair, not a de facto relationship. They underestimated me. They snorts underestimated a meticulous accountant and a betrayed wife. Suddenly, I remembered something. More than a year ago, when I started suspecting something strange was going on with Langston's frequent trips, I did something I thought was crazy. I secretly installed a small, long-lasting GPS tracker under his car. I did it hoping to get evidence of infidelity, but then my in-laws fell ill, and I was so exhausted that I completely forgot about its existence. I opened the app on my phone. The app I had hidden in the deepest part of a folder was still working. I had been paying the annual fee. The history appeared. It wasn't just a record of coming and going to hotels. It was a fixed schedule. Every day, Langston left work at 5:30 and didn't come home. He drove to a luxurious apartment on the outskirts and stayed there. Every night, that green dot would leave at 6 o'clock the next morning to go to the hospital. The night my son had a fever, he was there. The night his father was about to die, he was also there. I gave this address to Khalil even before he flew to the States to see Sela. Find out who lives in this apartment and what's there. A week later, Khalil called back. "Zora, hold on tight. Tell me. The apartment is rented in Sela's name." And guess what I found out? According to the neighbors, she doesn't live alone. She lives with a child. A child barely over 1 year old. Barely over 1 year old. I did a quick calculation. Sela had been back for over a year. Langston. I felt my throat burn. Langston and she had a son. "Yes, that's right, Zora," Khalil said. This is the ultimate proof of a de facto relationship and a crime of bigamy and affiliation. He wasn't just unfaithful. He formed a second family. My final counterattack was financial. Langston, through his lawyers, began to demand the division of assets. He argued that although the condo was in my name, he had paid a large part of the renovation. He demanded half. I just laughed. As an accountant, I kept everything. I presented a thick sheath of receipts. My father-in-law's 6 months of hospital expenses, the cost of his caregiver, the medicine, my father-in-law's funeral expenses, my mother-in-law's funeral expenses, the value of the specialty broth and tonics he brought as gifts. Your Honor, I said, all this money was spent from our joint savings, and most of it came from my salary. Mr. Dubois' salary, as he himself stated, was allocated to business meals and his chief of service position. I am not objecting. I only want to point out that if there were any joint assets, they were all used for his parents. And I even had to add money out of my own pocket. He not only has nothing, but he owes me money. Langston, sitting in the defendant's dock, turned pale. He never imagined that his disheveled accountant wife had kept every receipt. The trial caused a stir. An eminent chief of oncology, a top-level medical expert accused by his wife of terrible crimes. At first, the press was cautious, but as the irrefutable evidence accumulated, they began to report. The case went viral. Langston's hospital, unable to withstand the pressure of public opinion and health authorities, decided to immediately suspend him from his position until a court ruling. His proud friends and colleagues, all those he had wined and dined with money, distanced themselves from him. They feared being implicated. What wouldn't a doctor who tried to kill his wife for an insurance scam be capable of? The career Langston had built by selling even his conscience collapsed in a single day. He was socially annihilated. The trial was held, and everything became clearer than water. The recording of my conversation with Sela, the recording of Langston advising me not to get the biopsy, the copy of the life insurance contract for $5 million, the GPS history, the birth certificate of Langston and Sila's son, and the thick sheath of funeral expense receipts that Langston's lawyer had accumulated. He had nothing left to refute. All his defense efforts proved ridiculous against the mountain of massive and logical evidence. Langston no longer looked elegant in court. He was haggarded with graying hair. He turned to look at me. His eyes contained not remorse but hatred. He hated that I hadn't died. Naturally, the court passed sentence. The accused, Langston Dubois, is found guilty of the crime of attempted insurance fraud with an especially cruel and planned motive and method, and of the crime of adultery in maintaining a de facto relationship with the birth of an extramarital child. The court also recommended additional investigation by health authorities for violation of healthcare law with malice. In total, he was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Sela, as an accomplice to the crime of adultery, but thanks to confessing everything in hopes of a reduced sentence, was sentenced to 1 year in prison with suspension of execution. Justice had finally been served. I left the courthouse. The sun was dazzling. I wasn't happy, just relieved. Everything was finally over. The next day, I was admitted to the hospital with my suitcase and Wami. My son would stay with my sister while I had surgery. The chief of service, the elderly man, operated on me himself. The operation was a success. The tumor was removed, and the lymph nodes were dissected. Then came chemotherapy. My hair started falling out. I was already mentally prepared. I shaved my head. Wami saw me. At first, he was a little scared, but then he smiled. "Mommy, you look like a warrior monk heading out for battle." I smiled too. Yes, Mommy is a monk. Now, I'm going in search of the sacred scriptures. The scriptures of life. I was no longer Zora, the heavy, disheveled homemaker. I was thin, but healthy. I was no longer anyone's shadow. I was Zora, a woman who had crossed the threshold of death, who had removed a malignant tumor from her body and a harmful tumor from her life. I sat in the hospital room and looked out the window. Spring was arriving. The buds were being born. The future for me and my son would still have many difficulties, but now it was bright, a dazzling, hopeful light that had overcome adversity. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support.